Hello Internet, my name's Ryan and this is Ryan Builds Wheels. Welcome back to episode 4 in my series of How to Build Wheels. It's a clear and concise series to help you make the best hand-built wheels that you can either at home or in the workshop. So whether this is your first set of wheels or you're a seasoned pro, welcome along. This is part 4 in the series. So if you haven't already, go back, follow all the steps in parts 1 to 3, and I look back forward to seeing you here shortly. So in this episode, I'm going to be teaching you all about truing. What is truing, I hear you ask? Well, truing is merely the process of making a wheel straight. And once we have calculated our spoke lengths, laced our wheel, got it all assembled, then the next thing we need to do is start truing it. And the way that we're going to true the wheel is basically by changing tension within the spokes to make it either go left, right, up or down until you've got everything nice and true. After this, however, we are going to have to tension balance our wheel. Wheels work because of the tension balance in the spokes. A good wheel has spokes that are as near to each other in tension on each side of the wheel as they possibly can be, so as they each take their own fair share of the load whilst you're riding and doing gnarly stuff. Truing is super simple, and at the very least, all you're going to need is a quality spoke key. I really like the DT Swiss Proline spoke key, but hey, if you've got a quality key, just use that, whatever feels good in hand. Additionally, if you're building with bladed spokes, then some form of bladed spoke holders, always a good idea. Some people might be using internal nipples, or a nipple with an internal drive, and if you are, then some kind of internal driver can be nice because it feels different in the hand. You just experiment with whatever works for you. You're going to need some form of lubrication and a little bottle or something, some way of applying it. I like these nice little needle syringe bottles from RS Components. I'm sure you can find them in other places. And if you're a through axle user, then you'll need some sort of through axle adapter so as you can fit it in your choice of truing stand. Because it's got nice big clock faces, I'm going to be demoing this video on my P&K Lee Special 250. It's going to give a much clearer idea of what's going on. At home, you'll want to use something like this Union stand or any of the stands that I referenced in episode 1. I will go through some hints and tips with how best to use these stands and get the most out of them. Don't worry about having an all singing, all dancing truing stand. Something's better than nothing. Wheel building should be fun rather than expensive. Step 1 is to put your wheel in your truing stand. I'm going to say that that's simple enough. I'm just going to leave you to it. Step 1 for us is going to be lubrication. Your wheel's already built, but I'm going to use this spoke and this bottle to demonstrate what you're going to be doing. You'll see me doing it on camera in a minute, but so as you can see now, we're going to be putting a drop of your chosen lubrication into the bore of the nipple, that's where the thread is, and also around the shoulder. That's the area that the nipple touches the rim, so easy peasy. A note about choice of lubrication. Today, and quite often, I just use the old Wheel Builder standard boiled linseed oil. Pretty cheap, it does exactly what I want it to do, and it also dries hard, so it's got a degree of sort of thread locking in there, and more importantly, weatherproofing. Something's better than nothing. You could use a dab of grease, some chain lube, anything that isn't going to wreck your rim, especially if it's carbon. Check that kind of stuff. Go around the whole wheel and do that. I'll show you how. Start your valve hole, work in whichever direction you want. Just place a small drop of that lubricant inside the nipple bore and on the nipple shoulder. Inside the bore, on the shoulder, bore, shoulder, etc, etc. Some people like to do this before they assemble. I like to do this now so as things aren't messy later on. So let's do the whole wheel and crack on. Step 2, we're going to start adding some tension to the wheel. The quickest and easiest way to do this is with a nipple driver of some sort, and for that I like to use an electric drill because it speeds my process up. Doing it by hand is absolutely fine. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Setting nipple driver depth is a slightly more in-depth, no pun intended, conversation which we'll go into in the future. And try setting it so as you're going to need to add about 4 turns once you've used the driver. If you're using an electric drill and a driver, my top tip for these first steps and throughout the whole process, try keeping everything as even as possible and pay attention. If you're feeling skittish or whatever, maybe go grab a cup of tea. We're going to start at the valve hole and work our way around. The point of a nipple driver is that it's going to drive every single nipple on all of these spokes down to the same depth before you start working by hand. Some tips to make sure that this process is as accurate as possible includes using your thumb and forefinger to add some friction to those nipples when you drive down. This means that even once the driver is disengaged, friction from the tool can't continue to spin the nipple. As you drive each spoke down from left to right side on the wheel, make sure that your drill and your tool follows the path of the spoke that you're tightening. Let's do the rest. Step 3, after everything's driven down, is just to give all your spokes a light squeeze. Just help your bed spoke in and grab parallel pairs and crossed pairs. Just give everything a squeeze. At this moment in time, you'll see that a bunch of your spokes are still likely loose, and now it's time to start gently adding tension by hand. When you're starting out, don't try to get wheels up to full tension with drivers. Just take your time, be patient, enjoy the process. As you'll see, as well as the spokes being loose, the wheel's not quite straight yet. We've still got some work to do. Next step in the process is we're going to start adding working tension to the wheel. So we're going to need to go around the entire wheel and add a certain number of turns to every spoke. You're going to start at the valve hole, and here I want to introduce the concept of parallelism. I want to introduce the concept of parallelism to wheel building, and it's just a super simple way to keep track of where you are and make sure that your work goes a little bit faster. I want you to start with your spoke key as close to parallel with the rim whenever you take it on and off. The reason for that is we're going to be working in eighths, quarters, half turns, whole turns, etc. of the spoke key, and making sure that you're not at weird angles all the time means that you can keep track of that. Before we get started, let's just talk about how spoke threads work, and I don't mean that they're spinny things that tighten on each other. Just remember that a spoke thread is a standard thread. You turn it clockwise to tighten the thread and counterclockwise to loosen it. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. Some people do seem to get confused because you're working with the spoke key down here and not looking straight at it. To get used to it, if needs be, do work with the spokes that you're working on right in front of you so as you can see the direction that you're turning that key, clockwise to tighten, anti-clockwise to loosen. It seems simple, but I've seen plenty of people accidentally undoing their wheels when they're getting tired. How much tension you add to each spoke is going to depend on how the wheel's feeling to start with and your driver depth. I've suggested that you set your driver so as you'll need to add 4 turns. Here, I have got mine set to a little bit shallower so as I can work more quickly. I'm going to go around this entire wheel and add 2 turns to every spoke. I start as close to parallel on each nipple, and I finish as close to parallel as I can. By only adding a small amount of tension to start with, we're going to build up to what I call working tension. Operating at working tension is much easier because the wheel will move around more readily with the inputs that you put in. As you become more experienced, you'll get used to working at higher tensions in order to complete builds more quickly and more efficiently. But if you're only building wheels for yourself or for fun, just don't worry about it. I'm approaching the halfway point here, and as I approach the halfway point, spokes from opposite sides of the wheel are going to start pulling on each other. You'll probably experience more tension building up into the wheel. Here, I'd like to introduce spoke twist to you and the concept of overwinding. Spoke twist occurs when, as you add tension to your spokes, friction between the threads is going to occur and torque is going to wind up. As I start working, you'll see this little flag start to twist. There we go. The obvious effect of this is that your truing is going to be less accurate if simply left at this moment in time. The way to combat spoke twist is to get used to overturning. So you're going to turn past the point that you were aiming for, say 2 turns, and then you're going to turn back a quarter to half a turn. So you might add 2.5 turns and turn back by half. Getting used to this and having muscle memory for it is going to help a whole lot in accurate truing. I'm going to work my entire way around the wheel, making sure that I'm tightening, not loosening my spokes, and that I am overwinding spokes when tension starts to build up within the wheel. Approaching the valve hole now, and so the wheel is now at working tension. We can start to true it. Let's go. There are 3 different things we need to check when truing a wheel. We need to be able to check lateral trueness, and that's whether the wheel is straight side to side. We need to check radial trueness. That is whether or not the rim is both centered on the hub and or the rim doesn't dip in and out, so it's not wavy. We want as perfect a circle as we can get. Finally, we're also going to be checking dish, And dish simply means that the rim is centered over the center of the axle in the hub. To start with, I just want you to focus on lateral truing, side to side. Everything else can come later. Let's start by making that wheel laterally straight. We're going to start with what I call schoolyard truing. It's nice and simple. Take it slow. Use quarter of a turns to start with. As you become more confident, you can make bigger changes to the wheel. At its simplest, all I want you to do is add a quarter of a turn on the side that you wish the rim to travel and take a quarter of a turn tension off on the other side. For example, right now, my rim needs to travel to my right. As such, I'm going to remove tension from the left-hand side spokes and add tension to the right-hand side. Remembering that if you're at sufficient tension that you're experiencing spoke wind-up, you need to overturn. Adding tension to one side, subtracting tension from another. If you come closer, I'll show you that on camera. I'm going to show you using the P&K Lee because it's got these great big dial indicators. So as you know what's happening on camera, nice and simple. 0 means the rim is where I want it to be. It's central. Either side of 0 means that the wheel needs to travel in the opposite direction. Right now my dial indicator is to the left. That means my wheel needs to travel to the right. Let me show you how to make that happen. Here's a spoke on the left. As discussed, I need to reduce its tension. I take a quarter turn off. Here's a spoke on the right. I add a quarter turn tension. You can see it very clearly on the dial in real time. As I add tension, the rim is moving over. On your normal truing stand at home, to set lateral true, you're looking for gaps in between these calipers. The caliper arms move in and out as you adjust them, and you can actually start to use sound to tell you when the rim is over to one side. You can also see a gap on the other side. So, you're using them as feeler gauges to tell you. To start with, I recommend simply using this face of your caliper so as you've got as clear a view of the gap in between the wheel and the caliper arm as possible. So I hope that explains some simple lateral truing. Right now, all we're going to do is we're going to sketch a roughly straight shape in our wheel. Keep on working your way around, adding tension in the direction that you need the rim to travel, taking tension off of the other side. Naturally, if you find any spokes that by feel super tight or super loose to any of the others right now, you can try correcting that now. But generally speaking, I find this taking it steady process is a great way to start learning. Once you've roughed your shape out, I'm now going to introduce you to the concept of bedding in and stress relief. Bedding in only happens at the beginning of a wheel build, and what we need to do is use our hands to squeeze those parallel pairs of spokes again. What we're therefore doing is making sure that the spokes reach a high tension. Your steel spokes are going to bed in to the softer aluminium body of the hub. Doing this now means it doesn't happen out and about riding. In terms of stress relief, what this is going to do is any stresses, any of those little wind-ups that we've not been able to get out of the spokes as we worked, they're just going to start to undo themselves. I'll mention this again shortly, but wheel building and truing especially is an iterative process. We're going to go through this several times. You're going to go through it several times. I'm going to demo it once. With stress relief done, go back in there as discussed and see how your wheel's looking. It might have moved around a little bit, and now just bring it back to roughly true. I'm going to make this point once again. Right now, you're sketching. Don't get really obsessed with getting things as straight as you crazily can. Just get it roughly round, move on to the next step. Okay, next step. We now need to look at making sure the wheel is radially true. Radial true means that it's straight in the up and down plane. In the last step, for lateral true, you'll remember that I both added and removed tension from a specific area in the wheel. Here, we only need to add or remove tension to make the rim move up or down. Come in again and I'll show you. Once again, I'm going to show you on the P&K. This is my radial dial and shows me whether the rim is moving up or down. 0 is central. If the dial goes above 0, my rim is too high. It goes in. In that case, I'm going to need to remove some tension so as it comes lower. Let's see if we can catch that on camera at the same time. Additionally, radial truing needs a little less of a light touch. If you're using quarter turns, now try half turns. This was only a small area of this wheel, luckily for me, but those two spokes being reduced in tension by half a turn help to bring the wheel down. Let's show the opposite error where the rim comes too far out and needs to be pulled in. Here you'll see that my dial lies below 0. I'm going to need to count the number of spokes involved in that error. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these 6 spokes, in my simple schoolyard truing way, I'm now going to add half a turn to each of those 6 spokes to bring the wheel up towards the hub. Remember that to tighten means to turn your spoke key clockwise, and loosening is anti-clockwise. You're going to undo some good work if you don't get that right in this particular moment. Let me show you what that looks like on a normal truing stand and a quick tip to help you with vision. We're now going to need to move the position of the caliper. Just now, I had you use this inside face to indicate lateral true. We now need to indicate radial true. Bring the feelers down below the sidewall of your rim, and what you're going to be doing is you're looking for a gap or for the rim to touch as you move this up and down. Using audio cues is really helpful in this part. It's difficult to see in life, and it's also difficult to see on camera, so let me show you a trick that works for both of these. Place a piece of white paper or such so as you can see that gap much more readily. Alright, having roughed that out, you should have a wheel that's roughly straight both laterally and radially, left, right, up, down. Now we need to check dish. All dish means is that the rim lies central to the axle of the hub, and for that you're going to need a dishing tool or some way of cross-referencing it. With a dishing tool, this is your feeler and this area is going to go on the rim. Loosen off the feeler a little bit, place the tool over the rim in towards the left or right side of your axle. Flip the wheel around, and with the feeler in the same place, do the same thing again. Use the tool to find a gap in between the axle and the feeler, like this. Here you can see the feeler is not touching that axle, and what that means is that the rim is off-center by half this gap. I've made it really massive and obvious right here on camera, but let's say for example that's a 10mm gap. What that tells me is that this rim needs to travel in that direction so as that gap becomes smaller. You're going to do this a few times back and forth. Remember, when checking dish, the gap you see is half your error. This is one of those things that, to start with, as long as you've got it within dish by say 1mm or so, probably don't sweat it unless you've got a super tight frame. Just get used to how it all feels and you'll do better next time. Now my P&K Lee stand has some clever little cheats that I get to do for this bit, but you can copy what it does and not have to have a dishing tool at all, simply using your stand at home. And for that, what you're going to do is you're going to lock out one of these calipers. Grab a spoke or any other thin thing and place it so as one of the arms is locked out. Now you can use the stand itself as a dishing gauge. Choose an area as your reference point. I thoroughly recommend always returning to the valve hole. Move that arm that isn't locked out so as it touches the rim. This is your reference point. Lightly take the wheel out of the stand, flip it over, and you're now going to find that either the arm is going to touch, in which case reset, or it's going to have a gap. I needed to reset, so I'm going to flip over once again. I now have a small gap on this side. It's even less than 1mm, but it is there. Again, once you've found that gap, you then move the wheel to the left or the right. If there's a gap on your left-hand side, the rim needs to move to the right. Vice versa. Go and give it a go. Even though you might have to go back and forth to do this a few times, you should now have a wheel that's at a roughly working tension, is roughly true both laterally and radially, and is pretty much centered to your axle. It's dished. The important thing about wheel building is that it's an iterative process. So we're going to have to do a bunch of that all over again. When you're just starting out, go back and do each of those steps again until you're happier and happier with how straight the wheel is. It doesn't have to be massively accurate right now. Take your time and practice. In between each of those steps, you do need to be stress relieving. The further into the build you go, the less heavily you need to stress relieve, but it will help keep things accurate. Whilst you're going to need to do a little bit of work, maybe with some music on in a relaxed manner away from this video, you should now have a wheel that's true and relatively straight in all directions. Before we go, I'm going to show you some advanced tips for using a truing stand like this to allow you to cross-reference and potentially work faster in the future. That's a little bit of bonus content for you. For now, I do recommend just doing one type of truing at a time and just going back and forth between them until things get better and better. Go and have a cup of tea and a breather if things are getting a little bit out of hand. Right then, before I go, pop over here. I want to show you a little diagram on how, if you're finding this all easy enough thus far, you can start cross-referencing both lateral and radial true on your truing stand at home. So to start with, I do recommend simply focusing on one type of truing at a time. However, here's a little trick that you can use on a standard truing stand to start doing both radial and lateral at the same time, and I hope we'll start getting you to understand how a wheel works a little better. So, if this is our rim, and this is the shape of the caliper that we've been using, with the little feeler that I showed you on video just now. You got one of them on each side. Terrible drawing. One day I might even spend money on an animator. What you've been doing is, for lateral, you've been using these faces here. And for radial, you've been using these faces here. You can combine the two and start to use this face here for lateral as well. What that means is, try getting your head around this, is you can start to turn this area into a little bit of a matrix, like a graph. And what that means is, if this is the central point of where you want the center of your rim to lie, you can now start cross-referencing different types of true. It takes a little bit of getting used to and a little bit of imagination, but let's just say that you saw, in visualizing this matrix, that your rim was both up and to the left. Well, that means that it needs to go down and to the right. In that case, you know the rim needs to come down radially. You could reduce some tension from the left-hand side of the rim to allow it to swing in. Conversely, let's say that you found that your rim ended up down and to the right. You know that it needs to come up, therefore you can add tension, and you could do that on your left-hand side. I think you get the idea. It's much simpler to try it out in practice. Grab that cup of tea again, give it a go. We're going to be adding a final amount of tension to our wheel and learning about tension balancing. A wheel can be true, but it's vital that it's tension balanced. As you go through your wheel building career, you'll be cross-referencing all of these different things, tension, radial true, lateral true, to inform each other and to build faster. For now, I want to teach you the building blocks of wheel building so that you can self-teach more effectively in the future. As I mentioned in my other videos, great having you all along. You can hit like, you can hit subscribe, you can tell your friends. That would be a great way of helping the channel out. I do have a Patreon page. I take time out on my normal working week to bring these videos to as many of you as possible. Then there's loads of member bonuses, and you'll be helping more of these videos happen, as well as getting exclusive perks. So come and join the fun. So I'll see you in the next video. Hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends, have fun building, and see you soon, wheel nerds. That'll do. It's an outro, isn't it? Find a good pen, shall we? The good pen.